CAPSI podcast series, Conversations on African Philanthropy. After 2 years and more than 80 episodes of our Conversations on African Philanthropy, we are introducing a series of conversations that are theme-specific, program-focused, and at times recorded at the request of those at the coalface of implementation in order to document and tell their experiences and stories. In the first of such series, we focus on the Zimbabwe Alliance Initiative, whose grants, convenings, capacity building, and technical support have fostered a vibrant civil society, where partners were empowered to design innovative and coordinated responses that amplify the voices of those marginalized, influence the capacity of citizens to mobilize around national critical issues, engage with policymakers, and built regional and international solidarity in pursuit of a better Zimbabwe. Formed in 2010 to strengthen the role of civil society in influencing Zimbabwe's transition to democracy, the Alliance has evolved over several phases to what it is today. An initiative of several partners, Zimbabwe Alliance is a story of resilience, innovation, dedication, and passion expressed somewhat beautifully in some of the least expected places and ways.
Welcome to a special edition of our Conversations on African Philanthropy with me, Prof Moyo. This particular segment of the podcast is focusing on a special initiative called the Zimbabwe Alliance, an initiative that came about at the height of the Zimbabwe's crisis around 2008-2009, but started making grants around 2011. The ZimAlliance is a project that was conceived by a number of development partners working very closely with Zimbabwean activists, as well as some colleagues from the region who actually went on to a hunger strike to raise awareness on the project. And joining me today and this afternoon is Tatenda Mombeyarara, who is currently with the Amalgamated Rural Teachers Union in Zimbabwe. I'm speaking to Tatenda at two levels. Firstly, at the level of his current position as the acting administrator, but also somebody who is responsible for research and training. But also another level at which we'll be discussing and talking to Tatenda will be at the level where he was actually the coordinator of the Citizens Manifesto, one of the key pillars of the ZimAlliance project. Tatenda, welcome to the Conversations.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you so much for making the time, and we're recording this here outside Zimbabwe Institute offices, where I happen to also be associated. But also, this is a place where Tendai Murisa, who is currently the director of Zimbabwe Institute, was at the time the director of Trust Africa when ZimAlliance, and most of the grants that were given at the time, they were given under his watch. So it's a big honor for us to do it here. Unfortunately, he couldn't join us yet to dash home, but he's part of this conversation. So Tatenda, I want to start with maybe talking a bit about, ARTUS.
Okay.
Maybe for those that are hearing this for the first time from across the globe, can we maybe speak about the origins, the mandate, and maybe some of the key pillars of what ARTUS does?
Okay. So the Amalgamated Rural Teachers Union of Zimbabwe is a trade union registered in Zimbabwe to represent teachers, but with a specific focus on those teachers who are based in the rural areas. So the entry point for the formation of ARTUS was marginalization, which was being experienced by teachers who are based mostly in the rural areas in terms of working and living conditions, social amenities, but also a representation by the mainstream, teachers trade unions of the day, your ZimTA, your Progressive Teachers Union of Zimbabwe. They felt the case for the rural teacher needed specific, articulation and specific representation. So it was formed around 2014. That's when it started being operational. Initially it had two subsections, the Rural Teachers Union of Zimbabwe, then Amalgamated became the decisive or the outcome of those discussions then. So its main focus is to make sure that teachers who are in the rural areas of Zimbabwe are not marginalized. Teachers who are based in the rural areas of Zimbabwe, you've got other issues like a rural allowance, which would bridge the gap between the teachers in the rural areas and in the urban areas. A case in point, if someone is coming to a district administration center in Gokwe and coming from Gokwe Kana or some other area down there, people ford rivers to get there. People use coach carts. People will take 2 days to go and access a salary.
Yeah.
And a teacher who is based in the urban areas is getting into a taxi and uses less money, less strain. So in terms of remuneration, it's only fair and it's only proper that there are specific allowances which are allocated for teachers who undergo that extra strain because they are based in the rural areas. But over the years, because of the groundwork which ARTUS has covered, and because of its open approach to say, even if the work is specifically focused for rural teachers, but any teacher can come in who believes in what we stand for. So we have had teachers who are based in Harare, Bulawayo, and the major areas coming to say, okay, I don't work in the rural areas, but tomorrow I may work there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
programmatically what you are standing for is what we believe in. Then also ARTUS has broadened its operational perspective to say there are other aspects which affect a teacher at work, like climate change, the issue of human rights,
Yeah.
the issue of democracy. So teachers do not operate in silos. So because of that unique adaptation to broaden the scope of their operations, it has seen ARTUS's appeal reaching to, I would want to say, the 21st century teacher.
Yeah.
As the ideal union.
Yeah.
So in terms of its mandate, I would summarize by saying pursuing labor justice in terms of civil servants and the teacher, but also pushing for a conducive environment for a worker and a citizen to operate in, because teachers are also parents,
Yeah.
teachers are
Yeah.
also citizens. I know I've spoken too much, but I think
No. It's
that
actually,
is...
yeah, it's actually good that we get as much information as possible.
Yes.
But it's 10 years down the line. You are celebrating a decade, so to
Yes.
speak. What have been, firstly, your key milestones and successes that you could point to in the history and evolution of ARTUS?
Okay.
But obviously within that, there have also been barriers,
Of course.
limitations and challenges. Maybe let's talk about those.
Okay. I joined ARTUS in 2022.
Yeah.
After it had been, in operational from about 2014.
14, yeah.
But when you look at the institutional memory and, discussing with the comrades,
Yeah.
the first 5 or so years were the most difficult. It was a small union,
Yeah.
hardly
Yeah.
known, and the rigidities, structural rigidities of the Salaries Service
Yeah,
Bureau,
yeah.
which takes deductions from teachers for operations in trade unions, was not so friendly and still is not so friendly to teachers who position themselves as radically as ARTUS
Yeah,
in challenging the status quo. Their approach has always been radical, to say we believe in action and
Yeah,
in demonstrating our anger if we are angry. So that has not endeared the union to the authorities in Zimbabwe,
Yeah.
and that has made growth very difficult and operations very stifled. I would want to point at one major milestone. Whilst I was with this Citizens Manifesto, with ZimAlliance, we worked with upcoming social movements, including labor organizations.
Yeah.
So we noticed what the work which ARTUS were doing and also the limitations. So we tried to incorporate them in our programming and whatever support could be availed. So they did a march from Tare, which is about 268, 270 kilometers to Harare. We partly marched with them.
Yeah.
It was symbolic. It made headline news. It made the authorities uncomfortable. If I remember well, a certain allowance was granted for all civil servants after that symbolic and heroic gesture.
Yeah.
So it's one of the milestones which I would want to speak to, which makes ARTUS very, very unique. ARTUS have been awarded, you know, I wouldn't want to say winners, but they've been awarded recognition by Frontline Defenders, which is based in Ireland, for being, you know, brave, for being, you know, unshaken in the face of serious persecution. We have heard people like Obed Masaraure, the president, Robson Chere, persecuted along the way. Sheila, who stayed in prison for a long time. But that did not stop the union from advancing its cause. So the other milestone is that recognition on the human rights front. That is also another milestone I would want to point at. And like I indicated, you know, when you start to say we are working with teachers based in the rural areas, but you end up having, you know, perhaps the greater number of your members being people in the urban areas. I think it's recognition of their advocacy and commitment to what they set out to do. So from the time I also joined, some of the challenges I'm also facing is the issue of, I would say, negative profiling by the authorities in Zimbabwe. I have had incidences of more than 20 teachers who have asked for membership to be, you know, rescinded for reasons of fear, you know, at our workstations. If you are known to be a teacher affiliated with ARTUS, there is subtle frustration and harassment, and they are saying, okay, we are better off not being associated at all. That has challenged the union in terms of numbers. And the continued frustration from the Salaries Services Bureau, I have it on good authority that other trade unions are already having deductions in US dollars. But I have written personally more than 5 times. I have sought meetings. I have sat in a meeting with some of the people at the Salaries Services Bureau to try and say, look, everything is dollarizing in Zimbabwe. The union is crippled if it does not collect its remittances in US dollars, when every cost item, and even in terms of our programming and, you know, salaries to staff, needs to be in US dollars. They have not heeded that. Most of what we said went unheeded. Even the general review, I would tell you right now, 6 ZIG is what the teacher who is affiliated from ARTUS is contributing. We have written letters to review to say, okay, whilst we are discussing transition to US dollar, but can we increase in line with the cost of living?
But the ZIG recently just was in a way crushed, basically. So like
it can only compound it, but even when it was said to be stabilized, $6 was actually about slightly less than 50 cents.
Wow.
So imagine how many teachers would need to subscribe for you to pay your rentals. ARTUS is 2 offices, Harare and Bulawayo. So those are some
cents a month. That would have been the membership fee.
Yes.
Wow, my goodness.
So it's a serious challenge that without you know, being creative and partnering other organizations in your initiatives, it would not have been sustainable. Which I think is what ARTUS' distractors aimed at. To frustrate it and bring it to its knees, so that they do not have this persistent voice which is saying, no, we do not want this increase. We insist on a living wage of so much. We do not want this discussion board, the NJNC. We want a proper and, you know, democratically constituted board which does collective bargaining, so that whatever is made is not done, you know, unilaterally. So because of that, ARTUS continues to face
Yeah.
challenges. Of course, we know what recently happened to Robson Chere with other activists, which is terrible, and unacceptable. I know what he went through. I'm a survivor myself of abduction. I know what it meant. It's gross and it's intimidation. We have had some members of staff resigning after the incident. We have had some teachers, hesitating to continue with their membership. So I would say these are some of the milestones and some of the challenges which ARTUS face.
So, I mean, with what you have described, one would look back at the time when an initiative like the Zimbabwe Alliance was introduced, 2008, 2009. This was at the height of the Zimbabwe crisis, both politically and economically.
Yes.
And look at where we are today. Yes. And one would then look back and still wonder, what have we achieved in the process? Because it sounds like we are still describing, scenes and scenarios that we saw and foresaw back then. So the economic and political environment is still as probably unchanged as it was back then. Of course, maybe we can see movements here and there, but it seems as if the need to strengthen civil society is even needed in greater emphasis now than before.
Very true, Becky. I remember around 2010, 2011, I was with the Zimbabwe Labour Center led by Mnyaradzi Gwisai. We had one of the most cruel charges of treason for simply gathering to discuss the Arab Spring uprisings which were happening. Soon after that, we thought things were coming to stability when the constitutional movement around 2013, you had people from across the political divide coming together to say, let's vote yes to this constitution. We then sadly had the issue of Itai Dzamara around 2015. We started, some work in 2016 of occupying Africa Unit Square to demand, the explanations of disappeared activists and also answers to the economic crisis. 2016 for me heralded a moment when, with or without support, the people of Zimbabwe or the young people of Zimbabwe were saying enough, almost akin to what the Gen Z in Kenya is doing. Hashtag this flag, hashtag this gown, hashtag this flower. We had spontaneous, uprisings, which was not traditionally organized, but which was a natural reaction, to the protracted political and economic crisis. My own assessment is what then happened in 2017 when the military transition or coup, whatever is labeled, happened, somehow dealt a major blow in terms of social movement organizing. We had people who believed that, look, finally there are answers, there is change. We had demobilization. Like I said, 2016, we had a peak, young people saying, enough is enough, throwing stones and doing this. Then 2017, you had a scenario where, your people who have previously spoken on democracy issues saying, let's give it time, relax. You have your opposition people saying, look, things are going to be well. So there was demobilization of whatever had built up the momentum. So 2017, 2018, there were elections. Again, they helped to demobilize, to say, look, we will solve all these things by having a democratic transition through elections. We also, what happened, it came to nothing. And because of the charade of saying, okay, we'll challenge this at the courts, we have this 2018, 2019. So I would say we started again at zero post the 2018 elections to say we need to build again movements which are resilient, which can challenge the excesses of authorities in terms of political and economic crisis. And right now it's shaky, it's on its knees, and just to quote you, more than ever, right now is when there is need to strengthen, institutions. From what we've just discussed about ARTUS, if I could, I would strengthen an institution like ARTUS. I already believe, they are on the right track. There are other organizations out there who are similarly, positioned to do this. So I would say this is, time when such support is critically needed.
Talking of which, like I said in the beginning, this was an initiative that involved several other, development partners locally and internationally. And so if one were to look at the current context now and advise, development partners on how to engage, what will be your thoughts around the engagement of development partners in supporting and strengthening what I see to be, and I think to be, the resilience element of institutions like ARTUS and others, but also the forward-looking, ideas and thoughts around where these institutions will be in the next 5 to 10 years. Any thoughts around how the development partners should engage?
Okay, for me, I have always been against, rigidities. You have round holes, sometimes you get square pegs. I'll give you an example, slightly out of context, but just briefly. In 2021, when I was going through therapy after my injuries, I strove to develop, an organization, Zimbabwe Survivors of Abductions and Torture Solidarity Trust, having realized that existing support structures which were there were not informed by the lived realities of survivors
themselves.
And there was need for a survivor-led approach to the healing of memories. For example, my mother already has a heart problem from that incident. Existing support structures are not informed by that. But then when you try then to reach out for support, there are then rigidities here. No, it has to be like this. It has to be like this. So coming back to the issue, I would say there is need for flexibility. I believe in grassroots support as opposed to mainstream NGO support. I would want to give you the model of the ZimAlliance from my own appreciation of it. If I was a Mbira player, I could play Mbira either to protest or to push for the change I want. I could fit in the programming of ZimAlliance. If I was a trade unionist, I could fit into the programming of ZimAlliance. It was flexible to say, okay, this is the vision, this is the direction you want. What do you do? It didn't have to change you to say, we need to reorganize you. It would respect the way you are organized and see how we can make it fit to the vision. So if development partners could be so equally, flexible to have a real look at the situation, there are people who can, narrate, articulate what we have discussed to say, okay, this is what has happened over the years. These are the gaps. And then from there, be able to say, okay, you might, not be a member of Crisis Coalition or ZimRights, but what you're doing at that local level contributes to this vision. And we are not too big to support you. These are the outlets with which you can fit it in the broader. And to have, more realistic technical support. I'll give you an example. The EFF in South Africa, for me, has more practical examples and, knowledge for opposition youths in Zimbabwe as opposed to an opposition party in Norway. But the opposition party in Norway has got capacity to bring 10 students from Zimbabwe to Norway and learn how to be a modern opposition party. But when you bring that back to Zimbabwe, it can't fit the terrain. You see, so we have had challenges whereby we are getting blueprints
Yeah.
which is good, but they do not apply.
Yeah.
So sometimes you need to relook and say, okay, what works for you,
Yeah.
then we support
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Instead of coming with clear-cut templates
Yeah.
and say, this is support we offer.
Yeah.
See how you fit.
Yeah.
So I think that flexibility is needed. Allow people who are on the grounds to define and articulate
Yeah.
how they want to carry
Yeah.
on their activities.
Yeah, and for that matter,
Yes.
it's even more important what you are saying in a context that is probably in transition or is in crisis, because there's so many moving pieces, and so one, there's relevance of your intervention. So instead of sending opposition members or party members to Norway, you have funding, send them to South Africa, which is closer and
Very relevant. Uganda,
right,
we have
Uganda.
similar,
contextual realities
Yes.
and so forth. So very, very important. But at the same time, also, what you are saying, what I'm reading is that in a country like Zimbabwe, or in any context where there's transitions and crisis, you also want to understand the context so well that instead of using your traditional approach to funding, so for example, I was talking to one donor who was saying, POSA outlawed gatherings,
Yes.
but it did not outlaw concerts. So you could still program using a concert rather than using
Your
convenings
meeting, yes.
or your usual stuff. But in most donors, they would not see music, contributing to
Social change.
to institutional change and all these things. And yet, actually, that's where the answers actually lie. So I do get that a lot, and I think it's a message that most of our development partners must take on board. Talking of which, Tanita, that I now want us to move to this last segment, which is that you are one of the people that were part of ZimAlliance almost from the beginning, either by association,
Yeah.
but also heavily involved as the coordinator of the Citizens Manifesto. So maybe let's talk a bit about your own personal association with ZimAlliance. But secondly, let's talk also in your capacity as the coordinator. What you and the ZimAlliance Initiative achieved with the Citizens Manifesto. What did you seek? What were the objectives? What were the programs that fell under that initiative? And what are some of the things that, when you look back, you would say we were successful here, but we were also challenged here?
Okay, so I would start by saying, in terms of association, I got to hear about ZimAlliance by the support it was giving. It was silent but effective.
Yeah.
For example, there is an organization called NAYO, National Alliance for Youth Organizations.
Yeah.
It was initially called Zion, Zimbabwe, something.
Okay.
The way it worked with the Zimbabwe Alliance, I was not yet with them, but I could observe. I was an activist in Zimbabwe. I could participate in some of these programs. You'd hear, okay, its support has been from ZimAlliance. It did not substitute the agents of these youth organizations. That's one thing I want to speak about ZimAlliance. The ZimAlliance do not substitute the agents of players. It amplifies. In a subtle manner, it gives you capacity to do more what you were already doing. And have shared values. So for me, in terms of association outside it, is one of the things which drew me to it, which made me admire the work it was doing. Then the Citizens Manifesto, for me, still remains, the political home. I would say, yes, this is it. It remained about activating the agents of citizens. Nothing for us without us, but without seeking to impose its own, ideologies, its own systems, its own way of doing, but by incorporating the various and diverse way, organizations and individuals in Zimbabwe who wanted a better Zimbabwe about. So the most exciting thing for me was about coming with the vision. It was not an easy task. The very early...
Just to be clear, you were the first coordinator of Zimbabwe. I mean, the Citizens Manifesto?
Citizens Manifesto. Oh, no.
No, it
I was
wasn't.
not,
You were not the first coordinator.
first coordinator. I was just its first employee.
Okay.
Not necessarily a coordinator. The proper term then was outreach officer.
Okay, outreach officer. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Because it went on designing itself
Yeah,
as the situation changed.
Yeah. But in
This
terms
was-
of institutional memory,
Yes.
you would be the first.
Yes, I would be the first.
So for that purpose, we'll call you the first coordinator.
Okay, it will serve the purpose, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So that was around 2016, end of 2016.
Yeah.
Around that time, there was a convening at Sapes Trusts, from across the country. Especially the focus was on young people,
Yeah.
the young. Selling the idea was one of the most beautiful things which I've witnessed in my activism, but also one of the most challenging things.
Yeah.
You had people who previously, would go diverse ways, be it politically or in terms of any strategy.
Yeah.
So your Capes United, your Highlanders, your Dynamos, different traditions to football and approaches. So I would want to give credit to, Briggs Bomber
Yeah.
in terms of his personality as a person.
Yeah.
He had, for lack of a better phrase, I would say grace, to bring to the table people sometimes we had contradicting views.
Yeah.
People who would not normally, sit together and work out and chart a path. So the first briefings were, look, this is a path we have not walked. Everybody matters.
Yeah.
So we want to capture as much as possible and condense it into something workable in a short space of time. So it managed to gather views around a vision which then narrowed to a Zimbabwe that was not defined by the crisis which was happening.
Yeah.
So it was an acknowledgement, first of, there is a serious crisis in Zimbabwe. And the crisis, like you have already put it, is political, it's economic, and as Briggs would put it then, is then resulting in a very serious social crisis.
Yeah.
So its definition became more socially pronounced. And the underlying causes are political and economic. It generated lots of interest. It was a different way of doing things, a different way of consulting and soliciting views, because prior to it, you would have either you're going for a rally, you're going for a workshop where you're told to do, you are guided in terms of your discussions. But this was, it's a tabula rasa. Let's discuss what we are against this, what do we want? So shaping out that the Zimbabwe we want, I think those are some of the phrases we came up with. The Zimbabwe we want. You got to respect, okay, I'm not a woman, so I can't tell here the Zimbabwe she wants. I'm not a woman. So we have to respect the Zimbabwe she wants as a woman is this. I don't live with disabilities. I have to respect what they are saying. So it was one of the most beautiful, processes we went through, coming together, saying we don't want this and we want this, and then coming up with a work plan. The work plan for Citizens Manifesto was very straight to the point. We design, we come up with a vision, we come up with values or pillars, we do consultations, nationwide. We bring on board everybody who wants to be in. We do not limit people. People can come in their individual capacities as citizens. We encourage, of course, collective organization. It brings more value. And we go to a national convention where we share what we have gathered and we agree this is it. That's how we came with the document, the Citizens Manifesto document, which I still, which I still regard as one of the best documents in Zimbabwe. It's built on other processes, of course, like the People's Charter effort, which had been done before. It built on, the constitutional movement by Dr. Maduku in the early 2000s. So it took cognizance of those processes and the limitations of those processes. So I would say those were some of the most exciting things about Citizens Manifesto. It was inclusive. Then it had, of course, its own challenges.
Challenges, yeah.
Yes. So the very first challenge is defining it as, we had to be ZimAlliance hosting it,
Yeah.
but allowing the manifesto process to be autonomous at the same time.
Yeah.
You don't want it to become an institution.
Yeah.
You want it to become a space.
Yeah.
But you still need the discipline of running an institution.
Yeah.
Yes, that was not an easy task. You needed to do judicious resource mobilization with the consent of people. And you needed to agree on programs as widely consultative as possible, but also, keeping timelines. So in terms of administration, yes, ZimAlliance tried its best, but it was not an easy thing. Some of the people who would have constituted your leadership may openly come out and say, no, we are not okay with getting support from so and so. You had to respect that. No, we are not comfortable with going to see minister and so and so. We don't believe in such discussions. You had to respect that. So it delayed, the progress, because you had to respect, you had to learn, to work together. You had to learn to work together. Then the other challenge we face was the challenge associated with anything which was regarded as dissent in Zimbabwe. It did not take long for the authorities in Zimbabwe to open their eye on us. I remember I was responsible for doing the countrywide, consultation, setting the structures of Zimbabwe Alliance, and doing all that legwork. It was beautiful work, but it got us the unnecessary harassment. You started getting invited. I remember at breaks we called it law and order. Explain your agenda. What is this? You get the usual harassment on phone calls. You do what makes Zimbabwe in a crisis right now in terms of democracy and shrinking civic space. So for Citizens Manifesto, we were not spared that either. And we did not have contingency measures for that.
Which is usually one of the biggest challenges for civil society organizations. And development partners at times don't even pay attention to that level of detail to an extent that even though you program, you must also program for the welfare as well as the contingencies that might arise in a country like Zimbabwe, but in any context where there's still a semblance of transition, lack of democratic culture, among others. So, I mean, since you were associated with ZimAlliance and the Citizens Manifesto, what would be some of the things you would say, in the 10-year period that ZimAlliance has been around? These are the successes of ZimAlliance as a whole.
Okay, I would want to say incubating movements and organizations into formidable social change agents. I already gave you the example of NAYO, what it was before ZimAlliance, and what it became after. I could point to one or two others. It's work which ZimAlliance could do well. It had strategic alliances in the funding communities to be able to support these initiatives. Another example is there is a youth organization in Mtoko. I can speak off the cuff, but it was saying no to the exploitation of granite in Mtoko, the environmental degradation, and the unfairness of having a resource extracted and leaving people in poverty. ZimAlliance did well to support the organization until it was registered, to do strategic interventions, until it became, even up to now, one of the key voices from Toko when you are speaking about granite. So capacity building or incubation is one of the success stories. I can proudly say ZimAlliance can point to several of these organizations, including women, organizations. Music and art, there is a point you mentioned before. One thing which ZimAlliance and the Citizens Manifesto proved is that, art and music can be very effective tools to push your agenda.
Yeah.
It helps with your convening,
Yeah.
but it's a space which then allows you to have less hostility but much high impact.
Yeah.
So it's another success story which I can point to.
Yeah.
ZimAlliance. It
Yeah.
managed to promote, people, young upcoming artists,
Yeah.
who can use music, who can use their talents to speak out to these things.
Yeah.
Then, of course, the convening power. I am still to see another gathering like what we had in Arara Gardens under the Citizens Manifesto. I am still to see outside political parties.
rallies and all of that.
Yeah, I would want to see that.
Yeah.
So it had, immense capacity for convening. Talking to some of the, especially female comrades, it was a safe space.
Yeah.
So it managed to create a space which made people comfortable to come and participate and still feel I have contributed and I can go back to my space and still be part of this process. So yes, convening is one of the successes. Then itself coming up with the Citizens Manifesto document.
Right.
That is the apex.
Yeah.
It was no mean feat. I still believe it's one of the best documents which, if paid attention to, can drive Zimbabwe forward. We used to have, dialogues around themes. There was a time when it was almost on a monthly basis, in partnership with SAPES. We would go, discuss and speak to things which hitherto had been, the prerogative of mainstream media or political party commissariats only. We'll say, okay, so what do the citizens say? Yes, we have heard what you say, but this is the citizens' voice, and this is what we are saying to this issue. No, you'd invite your policymakers if they come. Then you say, as citizens, we will do this. So in terms of activating the agents of citizens, I think it's a major success story for ZimAlliance and for the Citizens Manifesto. I was discussing with a friend, when we had a spate of gross human rights abuses towards the SADC People's Summit recently in August. I was in hiding. Then we were discussing. And they said, you know what? This is the time when a process like Citizens Manifesto is best positioned to intervene. Your political parties in the opposition are silent on these things. No one is raising up issues. There is no space for anyone to come and say, we do not want this. We do not want this. So, I believe these are some of the successes I can speak to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to tie some threads here. We spoke earlier to Takuzwa.
Okay.
And he was also maybe making the same point that the document, the Citizens Manifesto, is something that for him now in Parliament, he always has to refer back to in order to frame his intervention and representation of the issues that he's now tasked with. And I'm hearing the same thing from you, that actually that document is always available for anyone to use at any given point in time to say, okay, we have heard what you have said. We hear where you are going with your policy thinking and all of that, but citizens are saying this.
Exactly.
And you've got all the documented processes, that show what you did in order to collect those views till today, and therefore you locate them there. But if need be, something that people can easily take and verify with the citizens themselves. So Tatenda, let's end with going back to ARTUS. So what's next for ARTUS in the next, if you were to cast your eyes in the next 5 to 10 years?
Okay, not an easy question to respond to, especially in the current context. For example, the president of ARTUS Obed right now is in a forced exile of some sort right now. He can't be on the ground because of security situations. We still have challenges in terms of operating as a trade union with the frustrations which we are facing. But I would say right now what is needed is to broaden the work of ARTUS and rally teachers to speak with one voice. We have started united front efforts. So we have what we call the Federation of Educators, or Federation of Zimbabwe Unions of Educators in Zimbabwe. For ZEL, we are saying we should not let the limitations at ARTUS, limit the voice.
Yeah.
But let's try and lure other like-minded unions who have other capacities so that we speak with one voice. So United Front action or activities is one of the key way forward in terms of ARTUS work. To say, look, we can't speak with one voice. Let's come together. Where are the similarities? Where are the differences? Where are the common issues which we can, benefit from? Number two, maximizing on technology. Because of your technological advancement, some of the limitations which would have grounded the unions have been done away with. Currently, we have what we call Teachers for USD. More than 10 WhatsApp groups with an average of about 700 teachers across unions. We are saying, look, you don't have to be a union member, just from voices from the classroom. We ask critical questions, we convene critical discussions. So this has allowed ARTUS, to exercise convening power and be able to advance what it believes in. And secondly, I also believe going, I wouldn't say more radical, but being consistent in the messaging. We have had situations where trade unions have capitulated either by way of being lured by the authorities because of bribes. In Zimbabwe, if an Isuzu truck is brought, you are a chief. Next thing, you won't speak about land abuse in your area. The same has been happening with the trade unions. ARTUS so far has managed to maintain its integrity. So if there is time for consistency, it is now. When it needs to become more radical and maintaining consistent voice on its demands, more articulation of issues, but also be able to attract capacity building from partners. We have had security situations. We need to broaden our work. How, if there is an organization that can help us grow in that area, we need to do that.
So Tatenda, thank you so much for taking the time and having the conversations with us in reviewing the work of ZimAlliance, but more specifically also its association with you and ARTUS. So that was Tatenda, as you heard, articulating some of the challenges that institutions like ARTUS and others are still facing. We are back to where ZimAlliance started in 2008, 2009, where it sought to address some of these challenges to do with resilience, to do with institutional capacity, but also to deal with the general environment under which these organizations operate, but more importantly, to deal with the democratic semblance in a country like Zimbabwe. As things stand, and as you heard, some things have changed, but a lot has remained the same. And the time is now for the different development partners to intervene, to assist, strengthen these institutions. As things stand, it looks like the work of ZimAlliance has to be strengthened and get more resources to assist the groups on the ground. Tatenda, thank you so much. I want to say in Shona Tatenda, for those that don't understand. His name is Tatenda, but it means we thank you. Thank you so much.
No,
but before we close, on names, Mombeyarara, what does it mean?
Well, in isiNdebele is Inkomo Silele. Yes. The cow, the ox, the bull is asleep. So my grandmother told me it was not our name, it was a nickname given to my grandfather.
Right.
Because of a certain habit he had, after consuming alcohol. So because he was in a polygamous relationship, to speak behind his back.
They were saying Inkomo Silele.
The cow is asleep there. That's a light one.
It's always very nice to get behind the meanings of names. So thank you so much, Tatenda. That was Tatenda from ARTUS, speaking to us on our trip here to Harare in reviewing the work of ZimAlliance. Thank you for watching. See you next time.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the CAPSI podcast series, Conversations on African Philanthropy.